This is Venus Brown. Costume, I'm just trying to do a little bit of dressing up as a black from House of the Dragon. It's not the greatest costume, but I think it'll do. Today I'm just going to be doing a little bit of a run through kind of on the House of the Dragon, Targaryen family history, just of those that are in the line of succession or make it to the Iron Throne, and maybe some of their close loved ones. If you like this video, please click the like button. If you want more content, click subscribe. If you click that little bell and click all, then you'll get more content notifications. Now, these are just depictions that other artists and fans have made from what they imagine the characters to be like. This is going to include the period in Fire and Blood from Aegon the Conqueror up to the point in House of the Dragon where the Great Council is meeting to decide on who will be the next king, which we find out in House of the Dragon that it will be Viserys. Who are these people? The middle person is Aegon. We call him Aegon the Conqueror. And he has his two sister wives. They're sister wives because they are his sisters, and he has married them. They are his wives, both of them. This is considered a normal tradition both in the Targaryen family and in Valyria, where this family comes from. So the girl on the side with the sword and the black and red costume and the black and red outfit is Visenya. And the person in the black on the other side is Rhaenys. Now, Aegon loves both of his sister wives. And when he conquers the 7 kingdoms of Westeros, he works with both of them on the throne kind of as his equals, not as subordinate partners. He considers his wives to be equally in power on the throne, which does follow along with Valyrian customs. It just doesn't follow along very well with Westerosi customs. Aegon, the person in the middle, he was the Targaryen king who joined the kingdoms of Westeros into one kingdom. He was joined by his wives Visenya, the older of his sisters, and Rhaenys, his more beloved sister, and they ruled together on the Iron Throne, with Rhaenys often at his side. He looked to Rhaenys for guidance. He also looked to Rhaenys for affection. Now, Visenya, she is more of a warrior. She is kind of the backbone of battle when it comes to this relationship. And Rhaenys is more of an artistic, free spirit type. And Aegon's relationship with her is more of a loving relationship. And they even make the comment in the book Fire and Blood that Aegon would spend about 10 days in bed sleeping with Rhaenys for every 1 day that he would spend sleeping with Visenya. So that gives you a picture of kind of how their relationship works and a little bit, just a little teeny smidge of how their ruling on the Iron Throne ends up working. We should probably touch base a little bit on the Targaryen tradition of interfamily marriage and sexual relationships. Because the Targaryens originated where things were very, very different from here and very, very different from Westeros, they already had this culture and tradition of interfamily marriage. It was a norm in that place. But it wasn't just for no good reason. At least they felt that keeping within that family structure and within certain families made it so that their bloodline stayed strong. Because the Targaryens are dragon riders. They felt that when their bloodline would get thinned out, it would muddy that bloodline and it would make it less likely the person would be able to ride a dragon. We don't necessarily know that this is true. We do know that later on in Fire and Blood, once they start marrying outside the family and outside of Valyrian blood, they do still have some dragon riders within the family. So it's not 100% sure. But the dragon riding wasn't the only reason. It was believed that the Targaryens had the fire of the dragon within them. This is why in Game of Thrones we see Daenerys burned in a fire yet come out unscathed, without a scorch on her, and completely almost unfazed. But we also know that this doesn't always work for all Targaryens. Some people with some Targaryen blood still burn. So that's not 100% sure. But there was also this belief that Targaryens don't get sick. Once the original person who came to Westeros came there, they went through centuries of illness and injury and things like that that naturally go through the realm and communities without the Targaryens getting sick. Until, we'll talk about this a little more when I get to this person, but until this illness that they called the Shivers goes through Westeros and ends up making some Targaryens very sick, and it ends up killing one of the children within the line of succession, which is why we'll be talking about this child. But either way, because of those cultures and traditions, and because of that belief that keeping that Targaryen or at least Valyrian originated bloodline pure, you're keeping those powers that root from the Targaryen and Valyrian bloodlines strong. And I'm just going to go over the names of a handful of the brother and sister marriages that occur in Fire and Blood. That would start with Aegon Visenya and Rhaenys, which I already talked about. Then you have, I think it's Aegon the Second and Rhaena. Then you have Jaehaerys and Alicent. Then you have Maegor and Rhaena. It's the same Rhaena as the one that I just addressed that was married to Aegon. And that will be an incredible story that is really messed up. And then Balon and Alyssa. And all of these relationships are intermarried brother and sister relationships. And almost all of them are marriages that were planned by the parents. I've heard online some people asking, well, when Jaehaerys becomes king, why doesn't he betroth Rhaenys to Viserys and get rid of this whole problem? But I think people need to keep in mind that Rhaenys actually found her own mate on her own. She married out of love. I believe she was married by 16 years old to Corlys. And also that Jaehaerys was the king, but he mostly was going to be involved with the marriages of his immediate children. The children of his children, which I believe is what Rhaenys and Viserys were, their marriages are more likely to be arranged by their parents. This here is a depiction of Rhaenys on her dragon Meraxes. I don't give an image of all the dragons, but every once in a while when I had quick, easy access to them, I put the image on there. So, Rhaenys and Meraxes. And this is not to be confused with the Rhaenys on the show. These are very different people. A lot of the names in the Targaryen family are reused over and over again. A lot of the names in Westeros are reused over and over again. So, in this presentation, try to remember that almost everybody I talk about is not going to be a character from House of the Dragon. Most of them up to the point of Jaehaerys family. Once we get to Jaehaerys, then you can start listening in and hear some of the family members that actually are in House of the Dragon. And when I have images of them from House of the Dragon, I will try to put one image of them so that you can see who it is that we're talking about. But the rest of these images are just depictions. They're like fan fiction or fan art, that kind of thing. They're not necessarily what the people really look like or what George R.R. Martin imagined. This is a depiction of Visenya and her dragon, Vhagar. Okay? And yes, same Vhagar as in House of the Dragon. I'm not putting pictures from House of the Dragon of the dragons though, so sorry about that if that's what you wanted to see. I'm not doing that. I'm just trying to get images where the characters are together. And like I said, Visenya is like really good at battle. She is a leader when it comes to the military. When it comes to fighting, she is tough. It's not that Rhaenys isn't tough. She is, but she is much more of a free spirit, much more of an artistic type. It has very different interests. Let's look at this family arrangement again, because when these kings get married, the intention is usually for them to have kids who can inherit the throne later. And what occurred with this situation is that Aegon and Rhaenys had one child, Aenys. Now, I'm not sure that pronunciation's right, but I don't want to do what it like because, anyway. That is Aegon's first true-born child. The next happens much later. Visenya, for a while there, they thought Visenya may have been barren, but Visenya eventually gives birth to Maegor. Maegor is very strong. Maegor, as he grows up, he is shown to be very brave, whereas Aenys is not strong. He is not brave. He wavers. He is considered weak. But Maegor is also very mean. He's very awful. When he gets married, he treats his wives terribly. He treats the kingdom terribly. He is not a good person. When you think of Daemon, think of Maegor, only Maegor is much worse. People compare Daemon and Maegor fairly regularly, but Maegor is a far bigger tyrant. Aenys, he is more loving and caring to his family. Maegor is just not at all. And because Aenys is the firstborn, he is the next in line to inherit the throne once Aegon dies. Even though he is the weaker person, even though he is not good with battle, even though he wavers and Maegor is much more decisive, that's just the way that this line of succession works. This is the depiction of Aenys, who marries Alyssa. I believe they're related, but not brother and sister. This image is Maegor and his first wife, Cerys. All right. Now, we'll go more into Maegor's relationships later because Maegor does not stop at one wife. Maegor keeps going. This depiction is of Aenys and Alyssa's family. I believe the top two with the crowns are King and Queen, King Aenys and Queen Alyssa. And then you have their children. Now, the taller male and female would be their oldest, I'm assuming, Aegon and Rhaena. Aenys and Alyssa betroth their children, Aegon and Rhaena. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later also. I think the middle boy is Viserys, not the same Viserys as on the show. Different Viserys. Remember, they like to reuse those names. Okay, and then the bottom two children, the small boy and the small girl, I believe are Jaehaerys and Alysanne. And they will later be married as well. But they are not betrothed by their parents. Now we're getting to Maegor's second wife. against the faith and against his parents' blessing, takes on a second wife named Alice. He says he does this because he believes that his wife Cerise is barren. And the faith gets very upset about this. They do not like this. This is not something that they are willing to put up with. And any offspring that they have would be considered abominations. Same as any of the offspring that come from the brother and sister marriages, according to the faith of the seven-pointed star, would be considered an abomination as well. Let's go back to Aenys and his family for a little while, because eventually Aegon dies. This leaves Aenys the weak king to be considered king of Westeros. And he is weak. And people recognize it right away. This starts to contribute to dissent throughout Westeros. And Aenys knows that he is not the strongest person. He knows he is not a brave fighter. So when he takes the throne, he takes his crown, but he takes the sword that he is given and hands it over to his brother, Maegor, and basically tells him that from here on out, you don't need to bow to me or kneel down to me. We will rule this kingdom equally together. According to the book, this was a bad decision on Aenys' part, but I don't think him saying anything else would have made the situation any better. I think the problems that occurred probably would have occurred anyway because of the kind of person that Maegor is. But there are a couple other things that contribute to the problems that occur within the kingdom. Not just that Aenys is weak and that his brother is strong and his brother is a tyrant. Aenys and Alyssa betroth their two children, Rhaena and Aegon, together. And this causes an uproar within the faith. Aenys and Alyssa send these kids out amongst the kingdom to try to present themselves to the kingdom so that they can show, the kinds of people that the inheritors to the throne will be. And it doesn't go well because the faith is in an uproar. The faith has spread this throughout the community that this is an abomination, that they are not greeted well by hardly anyone. It just causes a huge uproar. It's basically just flamed the fire. Another problem that contributed to this uproar among the faith is that there was kind of a zealot that was ruling the faith at the time. And when you get extremist zealots in charge of religious institutions, sometimes things go very badly. And this was part of that. This is the depiction of Aegon and Rhaena. Aenys has just become king. Maegor has married a second wife already by the time Aenys becomes king. The faith disapproves of both situations, but they're more afraid of Maegor, whereas Aenys, they're not really afraid of. Aegon is not a weak person, but they don't necessarily know that, and Aegon is not a tyrant, so they are afraid of Maegor. They're not so much afraid of Aegon. And they're definitely not afraid of Aenys. So the faith basically declares war on the Targaryen family once Aenys becomes king. They contribute to massive amounts of problems. And Aenys can't do anything about it. He doesn't know what to do about it. And like I said, he's a very indecisive person. For whatever reason, the stress, the anxiety, maybe a heart attack, who knows exactly what happened. Whatever it was, King Aenys becomes very, very sick. And he gets very, very ill. I think he languished for like 10 days or something like that. And then he dies. And once he dies, all hell breaks loose. Because at this point, Aegon is next in line. He is supposed to inherit the throne. Now, upon the death of King Aenys, Maegor basically steals the throne. He takes it without Aegon ever having a chance to get it. Just takes the throne. He also does another incredible thing. He brings a third person into his marriage. This person is known as Tyanna of the Towers, and she is known to dabble in witchcraft and things like that. He marries Tyanna of the Towers, which of course inflames the faith even more, but they're afraid of Maegor. And Maegor is a complete tyrant. Maegor is horrible. He is awful. We're going to go back to this image because I don't have a family picture, because Aegon and Rhaena do have children. Okay, so I believe before King Aenys died that Aegon and Rhaena did have twin girls named Arya and Rhaella. And these two girls, they have their own stories, which are fascinating, but we're not going to go into those stories today. I can't deal with the wig on very long. I have sensitive skin, so I get itchy very easily. I don't like being sticky or slimy. There's like all kinds of issues that I have. So if you see me like rubbing my face and scratching and stuff like that, that's because I have these sensitivities, and it's really hard for me to keep myself from doing that stuff. Like this. Maegor has stolen the throne. He has married multiple people now. This is his third marriage without ever getting a divorce or getting anything annulled. He's married to 3 women at the same time. He's basically tossed out his first wife, saying that she's barren. But we don't really know that she's barren. His problem is not just with his wives and his lack of having an heir. His problem is also that he is a complete tyrant. He is horrible, evil, awful, raises taxes, kills people, kills a lot of people, has a lot of people killed. He does not care, and no one is safe under his rule. Not the peasants, not the servants, not the royal court, not family, not his wives. No one is safe under Maegor. And Aegon, unlike his father, is not a weak person, but Maegor is a cruel, horrible tyrant. He is badass, strong, brave, doesn't give a shit about anyone. You think Daemon is bad? This man is really freaking horrible. There is a reason they call him Maegor the Cruel. But Aegon isn't going to just let this stand. He doesn't do nothing about it. He tries to get together some kind of army against him. And remember, people are afraid of this guy. This guy is horrible. He is scary. He will kill anyone. He will have anyone killed. So the people of the realm are afraid of him. The idea of trying to take this guy out is scary, but Aegon gets on his dragon. He gets an army together to go against Maegor. And we're talking about a very large army. Aegon's army is larger than Maegor's army. The problem is that Maegor has many, many small armies that he has managed to put together. And with those combined, they end up being more than Aegon can deal with. So even though Aegon has a large army, it is not enough to stop Maegor. This is a depiction of Aegon on his dragon, Quicksilver. They basically get annihilated by Maegor and Balerion, and the army is just not enough to handle everything that they go through. And either way, Maegor still has this problem where he is childless. He has no heirs. He has not been able to conceive, not even with 3 wives. And so what does he do? He decides he's going to take on 3 more wives. Talk about pissing off the faith. Talk about pissing off everybody in Westeros. This guy already has 3 wives. This guy is like, nope, 3 wives isn't enough. I need 3 more. I think they called this the Black Wedding. One of the wives he takes on is the widow of one of the guys that he killed in that battle. Another wife he takes on is Rhaena, Aegon's wife, Aegon's widow. All, we're assuming, an attempt to have a kid. Okay? So this is a depiction of the 3 wives from the Black Wedding, where Maegor does marry Rhaena, Eleanor, and Jane all in one marriage. There's this story about them having this one night together where they're all forced to have sex together. But there's also other stories about how it went, because that's kind of how this book goes. There's like multiple perspectives and multiple ideas about how these things went, and some of the writers were not actually there when the story took place, so you can only give so much credence to the writing. And some of the story is from Mushroom, and Mushroom stories tend to be outlandish and salacious. I don't doubt for a second that some of Mushroom's stories are true. I just think he does have a tendency to exaggerate, stretch the truth, and make it as salacious as possible. Some of the women do get pregnant. They do carry for a little while, but then after a few months, miscarriage comes, and these women deliver preterm way too early, I think around 3 months or so, and the babies are deformed. They're not ready to come out. The book describes them as if they're scaly and have dragon wings and dragon tails and stuff like this. But the book also tends to describe a lot of preterm babies this way, no matter who they come from. So I think this is just the people that are describing these births exaggerating and not understanding what they're really seeing, so they just describe what they know versus what they're actually seeing. Either way, Maegor's still childless. He is getting upset, he's getting angry every time he has a deformed baby. He's like, that couldn't possibly be my child. So he goes on this rampage trying to find out who are these women screwing with in order to get pregnant, because these couldn't possibly be my children. And they pile up this list of possible people that might have had to do with it and kill them. He kills some of his wives. Some of his wives he has tortured. Some of them he puts in a dungeon for them to freaking starve to death. The man is a freaking horrible tyrant. Like I said, nobody is freaking safe. In the meantime, his kingdom is falling to ruins because he is a horrible, horrible, horrible leader. And eventually, even though people are afraid of him, they can't keep on going like this. So, the realm has started to put together another army and started to fight against this guy, trying to push forth their own decision of who is going to be the next king. Okay, and if you remember, back when Aenys was king, Aegon was supposed to be the next king. Some of these children have been killed because of Maegor. You do have Rhaena, which I think was the next oldest. You also have Jaehaerys left, which I believe was the youngest of the sons. Also have Alysanne. Next person in line should be Jaehaerys, because Jaehaerys is a male and we gotta have a male in line of succession, which I think is a bunch of bullshit. But this is the way the realm is. This is how a lot of these people are. Not all of them, but enough of them to make it really, really difficult for a female. So you have Jaehaerys. Jaehaerys is fairly young, but he's not a baby, he's not a little kid, and he's a much better freaking option than Maegor. So this Baratheon decides that Jaehaerys is the up-and-coming. He goes to battle against Maegor. But while this battling is going on, Maegor actually ends up getting killed, not in battle. The people of the court wake up and somebody finds him on the throne, stabs all over the freaking place, which they say is from the throne, that the throne killed him. But a lot of people believe that somebody had him killed. Some people believe that it's one of his wives that had him killed because he's a freaking horrible tyrant. Either way, he's dead. He's bludgeoned on the throne. It's time for a new ruler. Jaehaerys seems to be the next in line who seems to be a viable choice for running the kingdom. There are other people that could take Maegor's place, but not anyone with a strong position who's not a female. So Jaehaerys is instated as the next king without too much argument or complaint with a lot of people. There may have been some claimants, but for the most part, most of the people of the realm are okay with Jaehaerys taking the position. They are a little concerned that he might be too young and too weak. But they're frankly, they're so done with the freaking horrible, horrible realm that they dealt with under Maegor that this seems to be a good option. And when it all comes down to it, Jaehaerys does not turn out to be a weak king at all. Jaehaerys turns out to be a very thoughtful king, a strong king, a wise king, and he knows how to work the politics of the realm to get things back together. He is fairly young. He's not that young that they don't start immediately planning who he's going to marry. At this point, Jaehaerys' mother is very, very worried about the idea of marrying within the immediate family again after the horrific treatment that she was given when she married Aegon. She proposes to the council they do not make any betrothals between the brothers and sisters. Instead, they're going to branch out and they make a few proposals. Not only are they trying to marry Jaehaerys off, but they're also concerned about marrying Jaehaerys' sister Alysanne off. And Jaehaerys' sister somehow gets wind of the proposal that has been made for her. Even though nobody was supposed to tell her, it was supposed to be kept hush-hush, she does somehow find out. And she immediately goes to Jaehaerys because Jaehaerys and Alysanne have always gotten along. They've always gotten along very well. And they don't want to be married to somebody else. And when she tells him that they are going to marry her off to this old man that she doesn't want to be married to, that she doesn't like, I think they described it as somebody that she really did not get along with. And Jaehaerys hears this and he's like, well, I'd be willing to bet that if they're trying to marry you off to somebody, they're probably going to start doing the same thing to me because I'm the king and I'm going to have a freaking heir. And so they're going to be trying to marry me off. And this kid is a young teenager at this point, but he's a teenager. So Jaehaerys and Alysanne, who have always gotten along, who feel that their council is going behind their back and trying to marry them off to people that they don't want to marry, and knows that their Targaryen family has a Valyrian tradition of marrying within the immediate family to keep the bloodline pure. They see this as very normal, and they go and they find their own septon who is willing to marry the two together. I can't remember what septon it was, but I think they said that this was a septon who had done previous marriages before. He knew this was a Targaryen tradition and did not see this as a real problem. So he married them together without telling anybody. He did his wedding in Dragonstone. He took very few people with him. And he told the people from his Kingsguard not to let anybody know what he was doing or where he was going. I believe it was one of the Targaryen weddings without telling other people. And we'll just say that when his mother found out, she was furious. And at this point, the Baratheon that made Jaehaerys king, he is now the king's hand, and he is furious as well. Before I go too far into what happens, there were also a couple other weddings that I should address. Before Maegor died, Maegor had a lot of his wives killed, but Rhaena is still alive. Okay, Rhaena ends up choosing on her own to remarry somebody named Andrew Farman. This was not at the approval of the royal court, but frankly, I think at the point that she was at with her having all that turmoil that she had to deal with, I think people should just leave her alone and let her marry who the fuck she wants to. So there was a little bit of disagreement that she married this person without the arrangement of the court, without the knowledge of the court. But at the same time, this was a freaking severely traumatized, twice widow, and I don't freaking blame her one bit. The Queen Dowager Alyssa, she marries the Hand, which was definitely unusual, and Jaehaerys did not like the fact that his Hand went and married his mom. I think he said he also felt like because this man made him king, he kind of held his tongue when it came to his sister Rhaena marrying. Then what right did he have to complain about his Hand and his mom marrying? But he was very upset about it. He did not like that. So his sister Rhaena marries Andrew Farman, and it actually turns out that his sister Rhaena kind of has a thing for Andrew Farman's sister. So maybe the marriage took place in the first place so she could be closer to his sister, but that's not really certain. It just comes up later on. And then you have Queen Dowager Alyssa, who marries the Hand, Roger Baratheon. So when Jaehaerys marries Alysanne, and Queen Alyssa is all upset about them getting married, and Hand Rogar Baratheon is also upset about it, but they're both married together. Alyssa and Rogar are both married together, and they both are in disagreement that Jaehaerys married his sister, but she's in disagreement because of the situation that happened when their children were betrothed. She doesn't want that to happen again, with the faith going completely against the marriage. Rogar is more against it because it's siblings getting married, and he thinks they should get married outside of the family, and because he says so. Strong, tough man says this is how it should be, and he's very mad that they went behind his back and did what they wanted to do. Either way, they have this situation where these two young kids have married against the will of the rest of the crown, and they are underage. They have not consummated their marriage. When Queen Dowager Alyssa and the Hand ask them if it was consummated, he basically tells them, no, she's too young. Like, I'm not gonna do that. She's too young. So they're like, great, that means that we can stop this. But Jaehaerys is like, no, I don't think so. His Kingsguard defend him and his wife right away. They're like, you are the Hand, but you are not the king, and they're basically the king's protectors, and they say they're going to protect the king and the queen. They stop them from taking either of them and putting them in a dungeon or keeping them apart or anything like that. Queen Dowager Alyssa and the Hand, Roger Baratheon, feel that they still have time. They can find a way to dissolve this marriage, to get it dissolved before any consummation happens and before the rest of the realm finds out about it. They keep it all hush-hush. Jaehaerys and Alysanne stay over there in Dragonstone while the Queen Dowager and the Hand deal with the running of the kingdom for the next month. But it does not go unnoticed that Jaehaerys is not there, because before he got married, he was very involved with council meetings, with the running of the realm. He wanted to be their king. He wanted to make sure that he was really an active face on the court, that he was really actively involved in the running of the kingdom. So when he wasn't there, people definitely started to notice that he was not any longer showing up at these meetings and being active with what was going on. And I think he was gone for like a month or two or something like that. Another thing that Jaehaerys does, though, while he's gone on Dragonstone is he starts training. Okay, he knows that he's a teenager, and he knows he's only got a year or so to get himself in tip-top shape and show people that he is not the weak king that his father was. So he starts really going through a tough, grueling training regimen that he's enforcing himself so that he can become tougher and better, so that he is not looked on as a weak king like his father was. But no matter what happened, the Queen Dowager and the Hand were not able to get that marriage annulled or dissolved. They were not able to come between them. They tried a few things. They said that Rhaegar Baratheon tried sending harlots over there to try to entice the king so that he would cheat on his wife, and that did not happen. That did not work. Dowager Alyssa sent maids in waiting over to try to convince Alysanne that what they were doing was wrong, that they were immature and they shouldn't be married together, that it was wrong, that it was abomination against the kingdom. And she basically sent religious people that were supposed to do this. So she really thought that these religious maids in waiting would have this effect on her and be able to convince her. Problem actually became that Alysanne was such a good person and was so good with people that she was able to convince everyone that what she did was right, that what she did was okay, and that she was going to make a very good queen, and that they had a very good marriage, and everything ended up coming together. So she convinced the people that were being sent to try to drive a wedge between her and Jaehaerys. That didn't work. They actually grew to like both of them. Wife is okay with this at this point. She feels like there's nothing that they can do about it, that the damage has already been done, and they're going to have to deal with it. Rhaegar Baratheon and Queen Alyssa, they also have this point of turmoil, because eventually once they realize that they're not going to be able to dissolve this marriage, Rhaegar actually, like, he blows his top and he makes this statement. Rhaegar is like, no, I'm the man and what I say goes, and because you did this, it's terrible, and we should have just never made you king, and we're gonna have to go and make somebody else king. He says this right in front of Jaehaerys. He says it right in front of his wife. King's guardsmen are also there to defend the kings, and the period of time was actually quite a while that they had to deal with this. This caused a wedge between Rhaegar and Alyssa. They actually split up because of this, at least for a long while. Rhaegar lost his position as Hand. Like, a lot of really bad shit happened because of this statement. So he's basically made this statement that is considered treason, that pisses off the king, that pisses off his wife, because Jaehaerys has to find a way to get the faith to be okay with what's happening, to be okay enough not to fight them. He has to get the realm okay enough with everything not to drive a big wedge, not to cause division within the realm. So Jaehaerys has to do several things to get the realm back on track after being under the tyrant Maegor for so long. I think Maegor was king for 6 years before he finally died on the throne. and to deal with the wedges that were caused because of his father that had been such a weak king. Some of the main things that he had to do, he had to get the realm on his side when it came to him marrying his sister. The first thing he had to do was kind of hide his sister away, keep her in the background so that they didn't notice just how close they were. And they didn't notice that these people were married. Some rumors did start to spread, but for the most part, he tried to keep things under wrap while he went through the process of getting people on his side. At this point, Baratheon could be killed for what he said. Baratheon could also be sent to the wall for what he said. And because Baratheon said and took actions that would be counted as basically declaring war against the king, it would be seen as very, very serious. And so Jaehaerys can't necessarily just whitewash everything and let it all go. Eventually, when it comes down to it, Jaehaerys has to deal with this. He has this discussion with him where he basically says, hey, I know you made me king. I will be forever grateful for that. What you said was terrible, but I think you really meant it at the time, that you really felt that my marriage to my queen was going to cause divisions within the realm, and by claiming that he was really saying what he felt was right for the realm, even if he wasn't right. So that kind of brushed aside and wiped away this idea that he had committed treason, because the king is now saying, no, I'm not going to call it treason. And the king is forgiving him for that. He's not forgiving him for trying to split up his marriage. He's not at all. He makes this deal so that Baratheon can still be part of Jaehaerys' life and doesn't have to go to the wall and doesn't have to die for what he did. He still has to pay, he still gets punished, but it's not the severe extreme punishment like would usually happen in this realm. He makes these payments, which I think was like some of his sons have to be wards to the court, and he has to pay a bunch of money, and he has to make these deals or whatever. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he has to sweeten the pot enough that Jaehaerys can let it go enough that he doesn't kill him or send him to the wall. But he also says, you now have to be Queen Alysanne's biggest supporter. You have to root for her. You cannot be driving wedges between us anymore. You have to make it very clear that you support her. And you cannot disrespect my mother. And he's like, you have to take my mother back, and you better fucking respect her. You better take care of her. You better treat her like she's the fucking queen that she is. It helps to get Baratheon's and Alyssa's marriage back on track. That helps to get Rhaegar to a position where he is okay with Jaehaerys being married within the family, and that he is now Queen Alysanne's biggest supporter. He had to change some of the regulations within Westeros so that the unsavory Targaryen traditions that were seen as abominations and not lawful and not right among Westeros, so that they would be considered lawful. He also had to get the realm on his side so that they would be okay with this. And one of the main things he did was he created what he called the doctrine of exceptionalism. And in this doctrine, he said that the people of Westeros, in their faith, they believe that marrying within your family, especially your immediate family, is sinful, that any fruit born from those relationships would be an abomination. And he said that in the circumstance of those who root from Westeros, this is true. but that the Targaryens come from Valyria. And they are different. They have a different culture. They have a different background. And the Targaryens are the blood of the dragon. They are different from the people of Westeros. They ride dragons. They have these powers. They are much less likely to get sick. At the time, they believed that Targaryens didn't get sick. Okay, because at that point, as far as they knew, no Targaryen had gotten sick from any of the ailments that have gone through Westeros before that. So they really believed that the blood of the dragon and the Valyrian blood kept them from getting sick, kept them from getting illnesses that would spread through the realm, that they were able to ride dragons, that the Valyrians, the people in House Valyria, they also came from Valyria, and they, if they intermarried within the Targaryen family, they could also ride dragons. That some of them with the blood of the dragon were, not all of them, but some of them were impervious to fire and flames and heat. Like their blood is fire. So like they are the blood of the dragon. They have fire on their side. And so some of them are actually not able to be burned. Some of them are, as far as we know, some of them are, but some of them are not. So for all these reasons, this blood of the dragon, the fact that they rooted from Valyria, that their culture and tradition is very different, made this exception to the Westerosi belief that this was a sinful abomination. And so that this should be excluded. So the problem I see with this is that he made this doctrine of exceptionalism only for the Targaryens to be intermarried within their family. He did not make the doctrine of exceptionalism for having the females, because why are we really saying that females can't rule in Westeros when the rulers are Targaryen? You can't say they're too soft. You can't say they're too emotional. Like all these excuses that tend to be provided when it comes to why a female would not be an ideal choice to be a ruler, even in Westeros, they tend to kind of fall flat when you start talking about a Targaryen. Targaryens don't tend to be soft, whether they're male or female. They don't tend to be overly emotional. Like all these reasons that they have really tend to fall flat. So what are we really talking about? And I think he could have easily, if he was able to implement this doctrine of exceptionalism for intermarriage within his immediate family, he could have easily added on female rulers to that. I think that was a really good opportunity that he missed. And that's just my opinion on the matter. Like, so much of what is happening with House of the Dragon could have been avoided if he made that part of his doctrine of exceptionalism. But he didn't. Maybe it didn't occur to him, or maybe he just felt like that was too much. He already had a lot on his plate. So he made this doctrine of exceptionalism, but he had to get it spread throughout the realm, and he had to get the faith on his side. He started getting people that were in the faith that were more reasonably understanding of the Targaryen traditions, started getting them together. He started convincing them that Alysanne was like the best person to be queen at the time, because they called her Good Queen Alysanne for a reason. She was really, really good with the people. She was really good in the realm. She was really good at convincing people to make decisions. The realm really, really did love her. And so convincing her that she's like the best queen for us to have in the realm right now, convincing them that this doctrine of exceptionalism gives them reason to have this intermarriage, this interfamily marriage, convincing them that both Jaehaerys and Alysanne together is the right thing for the realm at the time, and then getting all of those people of faith spread out in amongst the community, amongst the realm, to start telling them about what a good queen Alysanne was, what a good person she is, and about all the good that they are doing in the realm. So that way it could really be more about, this is such a good queen for the realm, and that this marriage is causing so many good things to happen among the realm. And Jaehaerys really did do a lot in the realm to improve relations, to improve the lives and health of the people, to improve the money situation, to improve everything. So this was like the beginning of it, getting people to see that these things were good for the realm and that they can be okay with it. After he gets all this stuff in place, gets the realm to where they're okay with this, he also does this thing with the faith. There's no longer this big regime of the faith entrenched within the court. Now he has one septon that is part of his council, and the rest of the faith can go and do their own faithly things within their own faith. They do not need to be entrenched within their government. So, separation of church and state, people. Keep it in mind. Sometimes separation of church and state is a good thing. Sometimes it keeps you from dividing your realm so that we go to war over faith. Anyway, I do have the image, of course, of Jaehaerys from the show. All right. So this is Jaehaerys from the show. This is as an old man. This is long after his marriage has occurred and he has started to put the realm back together. Jaehaerys does a lot of things to get the realm back together, not just to support his wife and his marriage, but he gets clean water. He gets new roads. He gets, I think it's him that gets the dragon pit going, like all kinds of stuff. He gets King's Landing to flourish in a way that it had never flourished before. He makes the King's Landing castle a real castle rather than just some temporary military regime. Like I said, he is good with the people and he is good at the politics, and so is Alysanne. They both go on these treks throughout the kingdom, just like Aegon the Conqueror did when he was with his two wives. They would go through the kingdom to try to kind of drum up support, but also to find out, what is it that the people in the realm need? What things are going wrong, and what can they, as the royal authority, do to help them? Queen Alysanne, when she was doing this, she would start speaking to the women of the court, find out what it was for the women that was going wrong, that needed to be changed. And there were several laws that were made while Alysanne was queen. I think they called them Alysanne's rules or Alysanne's laws or something like that, because she didn't make the laws, but she proposed them and she convinced Jaehaerys and the court to make them happen. So she was very influential at actually improving the lives of the females and some of the people within the realm, and so was Jaehaerys. This is just a depiction of Jaehaerys' dragon Vermithor. I'm going to read what it says. Vermithor, the Bronze Fury, was the dragon of King Jaehaerys the First Targaryen and Hugh Hammer. It is said that the dragon's scales were bronze, and his fire could melt steel and stone. Like Balerion, the Black Dread, after the death of King Jaehaerys I, the dragon was untamed until the events of the Dance of the Dragons. We're going to leave out the end of that because that's all spoiler for other stuff that could very well happen in House of the Dragon. So let's skip out on that piece. And this is a depiction of Queen Alysanne and her dragon Silverwing. This is a depiction of Jaehaerys' family, okay, at a certain point. The kids that are supposed to inherit the throne, they are grown. They have wives of their own. I think they have some children. But this is his immediate family, okay? Jaehaerys and Alysanne, their first child is named Daenerys, not to be confused with Daenerys from Game of Thrones. This is obviously far before that. They have baby Daenerys, and then they have Aemon, and then they have Balon. So these are the next in line kids, okay? So technically, Daenerys is the oldest, and Daenerys should inherit the throne if you go by the chronological age of his children. Jaehaerys and Alysanne even have arguments about the reality that he is placing his sons above his daughter. She does not agree with that, and the original rooted Targaryen traditions from back in the day, a lot of times the brother and sister would be married together and they would rule together equally. At 6 years old, an illness starts going through Westeros. I think they called it the Shivers. And this is the first illness that starts actually taking out Targaryens. And little baby Daenerys gets sick, and she does not get better. And after a few days, I can't remember, I think it actually went pretty quickly once they realized that they were getting the shivers. From there, it was like the illness took them down very quickly. You either managed to make it through or you died. Daenerys at 6 years old, she gets the shivers, she dies, and this actually does shake their foundation a little bit. This idea that the dragon's blood, that pure blood Targaryens do not get sick, that's shaken, because this is a Targaryen. She does get sick, and other Targaryens also get sick with the shivers and also die. The shivers takes a lot of people out, but it also takes some of the Targaryens out. It, however, doesn't shake it enough to really take that, to really completely remove that idea that the blood of the dragon is some sort of purity, because there's very, very little of what takes out Westerosi people that also makes the Targaryens sick. So even though they do end up getting sick and dying from this specific illness, there's still a lot of them that they don't. Daenerys is not in the family at this point because Daenerys died when she was 6, okay? But Aemon is considered the heir to the throne. Balon is considered the spare. This goes on like throughout a good majority of their young adult life. Aemon grows up as he is the heir to the throne. He's going to be the king. And they have this spare brother just in case, okay? Even before anybody else is born. But unfortunately, eventually, Aemon gets killed. But not before he is married and has a child. So he actually has somebody to inherit from his line. Okay? And this is part of what comes up in House of the Dragon at the very beginning of the House of the Dragon. When Aemon dies and Balon dies, they have to figure out who is going to inherit the throne. And if you go by this line of inheritance where Aemon was the heir to the throne, Aemon dies, then one of his children is going to inherit the throne if he has any children. And he's got Rhaenys. That is why, according to House of the Dragon, by rights, Rhaenys should have been the queen to the throne when Jaehaerys died, except she was a female, and a lot of Westerosi lords don't like that. But it's not all of them. Balon also gets married before Aemon dies. Balon marries his sister Alyssa. Okay? So, first thing that happens to kill off one of these heirs is that Aemon gets struck by a crossbow bolt in the throat. I think it was poison. I think it may have been poisoned as well. But he gets struck in the throat. He dies. That leaves Rhaenys, his child, as the heir. But Jaehaerys believes that Baelon is stronger and braver and older and more mature. And so when Aemon dies, Jaehaerys decides he's going to make Baelon his next heir. Not just because Rhaenys is a female, but Rhaenys was still very young at the time. Rhaenys was considered kind of your typical female. She wasn't known for being tough and brave and all of that. But Baelon was known for being very brave and very tough, and was seen as good, like really good leadership material, really good for the throne. Part of the reason that Rhaenys was looked over at the time was because of her being a female. But part of the reason was because she was young and immature and was not considered leadership material at the time. I think Baelon and Alyssa have 2 kids, Viserys and then Daemon. Okay, Alyssa dies in childbirth. And then Baelon ends up dying from a burst belly, which they talk about in the show. And the crossbow bolt that Aemon is struck by was not even intended for him. Somebody was trying to shoot someone else that was in his party, and they missed a little bit and ended up striking Aemon instead. So it was totally like this total tragedy and mistake that Aemon ends up getting killed this way on accident by somebody who was trying to kill someone else. Jaehaerys does have another son. His name is Vaegon. But Vaegon, when he's growing up, Vaegon does not get along with people. He's really, really smart, but he doesn't get along with people. He doesn't like any of his sisters. He doesn't want to marry any of his sisters. They frankly don't think he can marry anyone, because he is just not a people person. They have so much trouble trying to figure out what they're going to do with Vaegon when he's growing up, because they're like, well, maybe we could have him be a maester, but then they're like, no, if we send him to maesters, he's going to have to teach people, and he can't freaking teach people because he's horrible. He'll be like telling all these students that they're horrible, crappy, stupid pieces of shit. Like, so they have this situation where they feel like Vaegon's really smart, but he treats other people really crappy. He doesn't get along with anybody. He's freaking moody, and they feel like everything he's strong at is going to be countered by his inability to deal with people and work with people, collaborate with people. So he ends up becoming a maester anyway. It's just that he has to deal with a line of work where he is not working and collaborating with a bunch of people. He needs to be his own person, and he needs to kind of be isolated and doing his own thing. So at the time that Jaehaerys decides, okay, my heir and a spare, Aemon and Baelon, they have both died, and I need to figure out who is going to take the heir. I got all these girls left. My 2 main boys have died, and this other one, he is not the one. But also, at the time, Vaegon had already left, and he had already been sworn, I think it is an Archmaester. I'm not 100% sure on that. But he's basically sworn to something else, so he cannot take a wife. He cannot have children. He cannot take property or ownership. He can't be the king. He cannot rule a throne. So he's not really an option. They do say in the book that he talks to Jaehaerys or whatever, but he's not going to swear off his honor to the Archmaesters. I think he works at the Citadel. So he's not really an option, and he wouldn't have been a good option anyway. And at the point Jaehaerys calls this great council, Rhaenys is a little older, she's a little tougher. She's more showing her stripes, her strengths, her intelligence, things like that. And she's married to Corlys, who they feel was a very good match. So there's all kinds of reasons why Rhaenys could have been a very good queen. But Jaehaerys is getting old at this point, and he doesn't want to deal with it. He already dealt with it the first time when he had to decide who was going to be the successor after Aemon died. And he didn't feel like doing it again. So he calls this great council and lets them decide. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, the Great Council's decision set a precedent. And I'm like, it was one decision. And the Great Council was only called because Jaehaerys didn't want to deal with it. I mean, the Great Council basically is like this big freaking popularity contest. You have all these people from all over the kingdom that show up, but it's the lords that are in place that are making the decision. And so you have a popularity contest of all these lords who are deciding. And there's only a handful of kingdoms in the realm that actually are okay with females taking over. But there are a handful of kingdoms in the realm that have had female rulers. So saying that this is against Westerosi tradition isn't really true. It applies for a lot of Westeros, but not all of Westeros. They have Balon's heirs, which are Viserys and Daemon. Daemon is younger than Viserys, so Viserys is the one who's going to be making the claim for the Great Council. And then on Aemon's side, you have Rhaenys, his only child, and she's a female. And I believe in the book, Rhaenys had children, and it was actually Laenor that was making the claim. And Rhaenys was just automatically being passed over because she was passed over when Aemon died. Rhaenys' kid Laenor is an itty-bitty little thing. Laenor gets passed over for Viserys, even though Viserys turns out to be a pretty weak king. When Viserys and Rhaenys and Laenor are part of the claimants in this great council, there were also a bunch of bastards and stuff that were claimants, but they pretty much had no real chance of anything. When the great council meeting happened, Viserys was already married to Aemma. I'm still on the image of Jaehaerys' family. Aemon and Balon have died. Alyssa has died. Vagon is an archmaester over at the Citadel. Miguel, I think she's like with the Silent Sisters or something. She's also sworn allegiance to them, so she's not a real option for anything. And then you have Sarah. I don't want to talk a lot about Sarah because Sarah's not in the line of succession or anything, but Sarah actually gets disowned. Jaehaerys and Alysanne have something like 13 pregnancies total, and multiple of them die they either get miscarried or they die soon after birth. These and Daenerys were the ones that actually lived for a while. Daenerys lived till 6. Sarah gets disowned because Sarah was like this manipulative, conniving, always had to be making jokes that ruin people's lives. She ends up becoming like a prostitute and then in charge with a bunch of prostitutes, and Jaehaerys is completely unwilling to even allow her back into his life, really, which also means that as Alysanne's family members are all dying or leaving, she basically has nobody left. She keeps trying to convince Jaehaerys to let Sarah come back, but he won't go for it. All those children, and she ends up with barely anybody. So they have this young girl, Daella. Daella is very fragile and very sensitive, and she's scared of everything. She was really not made for this world. Traditionally, they would have probably had Vagon and Daella marry each other. But Vagon, like I said, he is not good with people. He's horrible to Daella. He calls her a freaking idiot. He doesn't want anything to do with her. And they know that they can't marry these two together. Daella is too freaking fragile to deal with a freaking horrible cretin like him. But Jaehaerys wants her married off because she's getting of age and they still haven't found anybody right for her because she's freaking scared of everyone and everything. And so eventually they make this ultimatum. We're going to choose these 3 suitors for you who hopefully are gentle enough and kind enough and protective enough that you'll be all right with them. And you've got to choose between one of them because your daddy is not going to let you get away with not being married. And he wants you married now. So basically, because they give Daella this ultimatum, she goes ahead and decides on one of the 3 suitors, who I think was like the oldest and already had been previously married, but the mother died and had like 3 kids already. So she marries her to this guy and she goes to live with him, I think in the Vale or something like that. And she's excited that she gets to play mommy. Even though some of her stepkids are like older than her, she goes and lives with them. She's isolated because she's living there. She ends up eventually getting pregnant. And this girl is like too small and too scared, too fragile and too sensitive. Pregnancy and delivery are very, very hard at any time. And in this period, really, really, really freaking hard and deadly. And for somebody who's really small and fragile and scared and sensitive, you're talking about a really freaking horribly dangerous situation. And for her, it really was. She ends up dying in childbirth. And her baby that she has, from what I recall, was Emma. Person that Viserys ends up marrying is Emma, Daella's kid. Just an interesting thing. But either way, this is kind of the end of my story. That whole great council, that was the precipitous of everything that happened at the very beginning of House of the Dragon, which is how we end up in that position where Rhaenys gets passed over again for queen. Viserys gets the position of king, and Viserys isn't the greatest king. I think Viserys did honestly very well when it comes to keeping the realm at peace for, I think it was like 26 years. That is a major achievement. But the reality that there were all these underlying problems that were festering under the surface that he refused to really deal with in a way that handled them appropriately, that caused all this major turmoil to happen that ends up making the Dance of the Dragons possible. And that's the end of this story of how we got to this position that we end up with at the very beginning of House of the Dragon. If you want to see some of the reactions, I have videos of my reactions and discussions for each episode of House of the Dragon that you can watch whenever you have the time. It takes me a few days to get them done, but any new episodes that come up, I usually will do video a little bit after the episode releases. So feel free, and I'll see you when I see ya. Bye.